Hey everyone, James McBride here. Let's take a look at securing our mobile devices. This is a hugely important unit, and we've gone far enough to understand how this hacking stuff is happening so that we can actually secure these mobile devices. And it's super important and much, much more of a danger on mobile than it is on your desktop, depending on the operating system you're using and the apps that you're using. So we need to get into the basis of this so that we can understand the choices that we should make. Now, before we get started on it, I do want to explain a little bit about myself. I grew up at a time where there was a lot of different operating systems. You can tell I'm getting older. And I love that. That is the main thing I loved at the time I was growing up because I used Commodore 64. There was Atari 400, 800s out. There was also DOS machines, which those were really expensive. And there was Macs and also Apple IIs. And those are two different operating systems. So I got to learn all these different operating systems and others as well, but mainly those. And it was just exciting. The most boring one was a Mac. That was really, really boring. But it was really fun to deal with all those. And then all that kind of dried up. I don't know what is with us in a society when we're just like, it's got to be this or that. It's just either that one or that one, and that's all there is to it. Imagine if we did that with cars. So you do drive a Ford or a Chevy, because there are no others. That would be mind-numbing. But we do that with technology, and so we deal with this weird thing where people just kind of put their own personality into the device they hold in their hand, and it's just weird. It really is. And the reason I explain all this is because when I really get into this stuff and I talk about, hey, this is the truthfulness of it. This is what you need to be aware of. Somebody's going to get upset. And then they send these emails and this is not true and that's not true. And they send me articles and stuff. And I'm like, you know how long I've been doing this? That article was directly made by somebody that needed to get ads paid by this company. So don't send me hate mail. Understand that I'm just trying to help you understand this is what I need to do in order to be secure and to have my information private. That's all. That's all we're doing here. I could do an hour and a half video on what I hate about Mac OS, what I hate about iOS, what I hate about Android, what I hate about Linux, what I hate about Windows. I could spend a long time. And I could also, in that same video, talk about the things I love about each one of those. Don't think that I'm on this team or that team. I don't have a team. Most of you are aware that I'm running this on a Mac, and some of you from the get-go decided, oh, he's running on a Mac, so he loves Macs. Uh, Last year, I tended to use this Mac a lot, but this year I haven't hardly used it. I've used Linux and Windows more. That's just who I am. I just get bored and I go out and use something else. The reason I'm not doing this is I've just on a Windows machine is because I just have found that on a Mac it does better with video and audio, even if it's older, it does better. And since I understand all these operating systems, I don't have to say, well, I'll use Windows. This machine is faster, it's newer, so it should be able to do this video. No, I know that this will do it, and I know it'll do it well. And I use my Windows machine for something else. And as a matter of fact, this is about all I've been doing on Mac is just these videos. That's all I've been doing this year. Where last year I was doing pretty much everything on it. I don't care. I don't care what you're using. I'm just here to help you understand what you need to do to be secure. So let's talk about our key terms. These are really, really important to know. Some of them we've already covered, but again, it places a big role right here in our mobile devices. But we haven't covered this one really. This is sandboxing. The term sandboxing comes from the fights that kids get in when they're playing in the same sandbox. So if you want a kid to not get in a fight with another person, give them their own sandbox. It spoils a lot of the fun, but that's a true statement. Sandboxing here means we're going to isolate this app. If this is a game, we're going to stick it in this sandbox and it can do what it wants in that sandbox, but it can't get out of the sandbox. It has to stay in there. And we'll give you an example of that later. You know what a malicious app is? It's anything that's really there to harm you, steal data from you. Unsecured Wi-Fi, that's going into Walmart and you're like, man, I do not have a good cell connection. I wonder if Walmart, oh yeah, they do. Click and you get on their Wi-Fi. The way you know that Wi-Fi is not secured is it does not ask you for a password. You just connect to it. Now, I will point out that you are using a protocol that encrypts your data between you and the access point. So if somebody's out there not part of that network, they're not part of the network at all, and they're just monitoring wireless signal, trying to see if they can steal your data, that's going to be encrypted. However, if they get onto the same network as you, now they can actually see what you're doing. So that's unsecured Wi-Fi. And as usually, that's when we use it, right? Those big buildings block cell networks. They just block Wi-Fi a lot. And so you go in there and you may, oh, I'm in Safeway. I have no cell connection, right? You get on their Wi-Fi. And it's important to know that. Permissions, in this particular sense, they're talking about access granted to applications. What permissions does this application have? What permissions is it asking for? So permissions, that's a big thing. Like you have permissions when you get on your computer, you have certain permissions when you're at work and so on. This is talking about app permissions. Full disk encryption. So we cover that in operating systems, how you can encrypt on Windows and Mac. But it's more important on these mobile devices because they are mobile. You leave them someplace and now you're in trouble. See, really there's two things that are going on here. So I don't want you to think, oh, this full disk encryption is what does our security for us. It's a part of it. When you plug in, so you got that little charge port and it's also a data port, you plug that in and you plug it into a computer, then what happens is it comes up and says on the computer, you got to go over to this device and actually say it's okay because I can't access the information on it. And so over on the device, you have to put in a PIN, facial recognition, something, and now the computer can do something with that. A lot of people never even think about this, but you can take your iPhone or your Android and plug it into your Windows machine, and it's automatically going to go, your phone is going to say, oh, I've been plugged in for a reason. So why have I been plugged in? Probably for photos and documents. That's probably what it is. And then if you go ahead and type that in, it'll pull up your photos and you can copy them onto your computer. Sweet. Most people don't even do that. So there's a process, and that process goes back to your authentication, which we talked about in the first unit. User ID, password, PIN number, facial recognition. You're basically providing authentication for that connection to happen. The other thing is full disk encryption. There are sometimes ways, probably not sometimes, probably all the times, ways for hackers to plug that in, like they got your phone, plug it in, and of course it's, I don't know what your PIN is. I don't have your face. This is not working for me. How do I get around this prompt that's saying it's got to authenticate? And there's hacks to do that. So full disk encryption, because if it's not full disk encryption, then when you plug it in, it's like, oh, I don't need to worry about this password over here. I can see the drive. I can see where they put all that data, and I'm just going to copy off all that data because it's not encrypted. So you got those two things that you're really dealing with, and that's where encryption fits in. It enables that device to keep that secret and ties it to that authentication, where if it's not disk encrypted, maybe they could get around it and see what's on there. Remote wipe is really important. I tell people all the time, on Android, it forces you to use a Google account. You cannot set up an Android device for the last 10 years without setting up a Google account. You have that phone or that tablet and you're going through the setup process and it gets in there and it's like, okay, what's your Google account? Oh, don't have one? Create one. And you can't say, no, I don't want to. It forces you to do it. Part of the goodness of that is the fact that remote wipe is now available to you. You tie that to your Google account, and if you lose that device, you can go into that Google account, go to devices and say, wipe that thing. I don't know where it is anymore, but I don't want anybody being able to get information off of it, even though I'm using full disk encryption. I'm just going to wipe it. iOS does not require that. So they get to the point and they're like, what's your iCloud? You should set one up. But you can skip it. You can say, I want to do this later. I want to do this later, and then never do it. And so then that device is not tied to any cloud account, which maybe you say to yourself, that's more private. I don't have this cloud account that's tracking me. That's something that you can consider, but you also can't remote wipe because there's no way that it can. It does, you haven't tied it to a specific account. So I always tell students, you know, Android's going to force you to do it. You need to be aware that you have remote wipe, which is awesome. iOS is not going to force you. You really need to get an iCloud account if you don't already have one and put it in so that you can remote wipe if you need to. Smishing we talked about, which is basically some type of, hey, buddy, you won some money, and it's coming through an SMS or a text message. That's really what that's referring to. Oh, yeah, you just got your Amazon order is going to ship, and it's a $1,000 TV. Click here, see the update on that. Oh. So that's what smishing is, right? That attack is prevalent, so prevalent. And if you've had anybody that's had their phone hacked, then you'll get a lot of these. So usually that's how that happens. Usually you have a friend that's been hacked and boom, now you're getting all this stuff. Mobile hardening just refers to what do you do to configure this particular device so that it is as secure and private as possible. That's what hardening refers to. So if you harden your notebook, your PC, whatever it happens to be, you're basically saying I'm putting virus checkers on there, I'm updating all the time, I've got security access for different people that are using it. That's hardening. So mobile hardening is basically what can I do on this mobile device to make sure that it's as hard to get into as possible. And remote wiping is part of that, full disk encryption is part of that, sandboxing is part of that. What applications you're installing is part of that. This is a big part. On mobile, we like to have fun on it, lots of applications. What permissions is it asking for? All right, so we can't talk about mobile security without talking about rooting and jailbreaking, which are really the same thing. Jailbreaking happens on an iOS device, rooting happens on an Android device. The reason why is because Android is based off of Linux, and there is a user account known as root. And root means admin. They have full control over everything on that phone. The term jailbreaking comes from the fact that iOS devices, you have this app store. You're tied to that app store, and you can only choose what's on that app store. And Apple reviews it to make sure it won't harm your system and is not illegal. And they can be super overprotective about that. Really, really bad. And so people said the hacking community is like, oh, those iOS devices are in jail. You need to get your iPhone out of jail. And so you call it jailbreaking, but it's the same thing. These are exactly the same things. Now, what are the positives? Well, it allows you to install a bunch of tweaks, change system settings that you normally can't change. You can change how the thing behaves. You can just really, really do anything you want to those devices. So they give you this rooting and jailbreaking give you more control. However, that control comes by breaking the security model. And then what do they mean by that? Well, this is how we keep it secure. That's the model of how they keep it secure. So you're breaking that. And I'm going to tell you honestly, it's not worth it. Don't do it. The reason it's not worth it is because most hacking individuals out there know that you want to do this. And they've already put rootkits and viruses and Trojans into the process of you jailbreaking or rooting the device. So you'll just be rooted or jailbroken. You'll be hacked the moment that you root or jailbreak. That's honestly, that is absolutely true. Now, if that doesn't happen, if you just found a super secure source and they're just on the up and up and everything is great, you still are going to access things programs that allow you to do these tweaks, that allow you to change core system files. And those are normally hacked. So that's my plea. Don't do it. If you want to do this, actually get a different phone that, pretty much you're going to use on Wi-Fi or whatever, and you make that happen. You use that and see how it goes. Don't use your phone that you use for communications. All right, so let's take a look at some security and common threats, things that we're doing. We already talked about sandboxing, but that is a major portion of security. Apps do not automatically have full system access. This is true for every operating system that's current. Older Android models, this is not true. There was apps that could get full access. And we'll talk about, okay, why is that the case in a minute. Each app runs in its own restricted environment, meaning sandbox. So each app is stuck in their own little sandbox instead of this one big area. Now, if you don't know anything about operating systems, you're like, okay, that sounds great. Yeah, well, traditional operating systems didn't do that. You just had Windows and all the apps ran inside of that. And you had Mac OS and everything ran inside of that. And you have Linux and everything runs inside of that. So when they're moving to mobile, basically what Apple does is said, let's try to make this mobile device really, really like usable. In other words, never fail. It just works and works and works, and you don't have to worry about it. That was unique because at the time, while their operating system would have been said to be more reliable, both them and Windows had system crashes, especially Windows at the time. You go back to Windows 95 and Windows ME. That's all the way up to the year 2000. And they just crash all the time. And that's because these apps were always messing with each other. So these apps weren't restricted in any way. And so when Apple said, let's just take the operating system we're using, which is Unix based, and we'll then do these things that cause it to really, really work well and not crash. So you don't really ever get on any phone these days the situation where you're playing a game and it just crashes your phone. Like your phone just locks up, or you're using the web browser and it just locks. I mean, right now you guys are like, yeah, no, that doesn't happen. That happened before? Oh yeah, it happened all the time. So when Apple moved forward, they're like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to tie it to the store and we're going to restrict what people can put in the store. We're going to highly guard what's in the store. That way, if somebody downloads something from our store, we know it works. It's not going to crash the system. It's not going to hack them, right? That was their model. Over on Android, they were kind of under the gun. The original Android version was actually looks like BlackBerry. If you can ever find a picture of it, it's very hard to find now. But the first version, it wasn't released on the phones yet. People could put it on phones, but it was BlackBerry. It had menus basically. So when iOS came out, and let's be honest, icons, clicking on icons, that hasn't been original since 1977. I mean, it's not original. But there was a bunch of stuff that was really original on there. It wasn't the icon portion. And no, I did not have one and did not buy one. I had a different smartphone. Smartphones were around forever before Apple got there. In any case, what ends up happening is Android is rushed to market. They had always planned Chromium, which is what Chrome browser is based on, to be their operating system of what it would be in the future, but that was not ready. And so they quickly got Android going, and Android was really designed a lot more like Windows was. And so they've moved forward a little bit at a time to finally get to this point where apps are isolated and permissions are limited. And I explain all that because we're going to get into, that's why I say, oh, if you have one from 6 years ago, you need to worry about this. If you don't have one from 6 years ago, you're fine. Because back before, yeah, they had apps that had full system access, and a game then was actually monitoring your phone calls and stuff like that. There was nothing restricted. All right. iOSs enforce permission-based access controls, meaning does this app have permissions to get into your contacts? Where does that permission come from? It should come from you. You should have to say, yes, you can use my contacts. And if you say no to that, then they don't have permissions for it. There are regular updates and patches because honestly, right, these systems are hacked all the time. They fix holes all the time. Software programming or coding is so complex that they'll fix these five things, roll out a new version, and break two of the others. And so that needs to be fixed. I mean, it's complicated stuff. And so they're constantly patching. Do not let your system get out of your current patches. Again, I mentioned this way in the beginning. Sure, you look and say, there's a new iPhone update, and Apple has been known to screw some stuff up. Well, then wait a week or two. Usually, if there's a problem, within a week or two, there's a fix. Same with Android, same with Windows, same with Mac OS, same with Linux. So if there's a real problem, they'll fix it quickly. So yeah, wait a couple of weeks, but do not wait a month or 2 months. Otherwise, you may find out that you've been hacked because you should have updated. All right, you know what a malicious app is. You know what smishing is. We're going to trick you by sending you those texts, unsecured Wi-Fi, social engineering. That's part of smishing. You get a text message that says you got free Walmart stuff, that kind of thing. And then, of course, weak screen lock. Again, this goes back in time. These days, they're forcing you to use a Face ID, use a fingerprint, or use at least a 6-digit PIN because 4 digits is really short. But other past operating systems, speaking of Android, you could actually draw on it. And that was really cool. People are like, look, I don't have to type in a PIN. I can do a Z. Yeah, I just saw you did a Z. So that one's pretty much gone away. Some people still think that's cool, but it's like if I even have just glance over at you while you put in your PIN and you draw a Z, I know how to get in now. That's much harder than if somebody had typed it in. It's like, wait, what numbers did they hit? So some of those weak things that they've done in the past. All right, so we talked about our biometrics, our full disk encryption, our remote wipe, being able to wipe this information from a remote spot that's tied into your account, that's tied to that phone. Important to have that happen. If you don't have that happening, then you can't remote wipe. Review permissions. Regularly audit app permissions and revoke access that isn't necessary. Now, this is important, but only when you're one of those people that it's like, hey, cool, I'll get that game. Cool, I'll get that game. Cool, that's a neat app. And you're downloading a bunch of stuff. What happens is on an Android, when you download that, you have agreed to give it certain permissions. And if you didn't look at what those permissions were, most people think it's about, oh, they're giving me this thing on the screen so that I won't steal their information. I won't copy their game. But really what it is this is the permissions I'm going to use as this app, and you're saying okay right now. And that somewhat happens on iOS, but usually when you run the app, it'll say this app is requesting these permissions. So I've got another video that actually gets into, okay, this is what you want to look at. So you'll want to watch that if you're not aware of this stuff, because yeah, there's stuff on iOS and there's stuff on Android that basically are Trojans that are looking at your contacts and looking at the numbers you're dialing and doing that kind of stuff. But you're told up front that that's happening. And so you need to review the permissions before you actually download it. Now, I don't know. I hear this is happening, but I don't know. On Android, they're supposed to be giving you a summary screen that actually shows you all the applications and all the permissions that they've asked. On iOS, that's there. So if you go into settings, you can look at all the applications and whether or not they want access to your health data or your microphone or whatever. And on that screen, you can just turn it on and off. So even if you gave something permissions and then later you're like, wait a minute, why does that game want to look at my health data? Well, if it's on, it means they are looking at your health data and you can just switch it off. So that's what the other videos will take a look at. Automatic updates, that's usually what I have going on. It's automatic. But on iOS, it's a lot less automatic because you may not have enough space. It's got to be able to install it. That is a problem with iOS. Why? Because for some reason, Apple really wants to make a ton of money off of how much memory they give you. That is the worst. That is absolutely the worst. Now, their memory, their storage is super, super fast. But boy, it sure would be nice if I had on my iOS device a little SD card slot that I could put in. That is a lot slower. However, and so what I'm saying is that Apple is just hypersensitive about like, oh, this is our experience. We're not going to let you put that in there because one, it'll slow it down, and then you might deal with some corruption because you popped that thing out when you shouldn't have. And then two, we want to sell you more storage space, and that's going to cost you $200. Which is ridiculous. Automatically, it's ridiculous. So automatic updates on an iOS device can be much more difficult because you don't have the space needed and you have it set to automatically update, but it's not because you don't have the space to do it. It's very frustrating. And then the official app stores. That I tell students this weird thing, and some of them believe me, some of them don't. The Apple App Store was the killer thing for the iPhone. When you're dealing with any kind of technology, there has to be a reason to buy the hardware. And that thing is known as the killer app. These days, for any kind of computer or device, the killer app is web access. People don't buy a computer usually to just do their taxes on or to run an encyclopedia off of a CD-ROM like we used to. If it can't get on the internet, then nobody's going to buy it. That's the killer app. The official app stores for these devices, those are the killer apps. On Apple, it meant you could go out and get these games all in this central location. You didn't have to go around the web and try to find a game that you liked or a calendar app you liked or whatever, a book reading app you liked. They were just all there and you could see them and they were all checked and all of it worked and you didn't have a problem with anything crashing your machine. And so then all the others followed suit. So before this happened, there was no, here's the Microsoft App Store, here's the Google Play Store. Uh, Apple caused that transition to happen. And it is a fantastic transition because it means that it is one central location where Android can try, Google can try to keep junk out of there that will crash your system. And then the Apple App Store, just to mention, yeah, it is way overly controlled. It bugs me to no end. You have people that are trying to update a game and it's taken months and months and months to finally get updated out there because they got to review it by hand. And that's the way they do it. And so that's a problem. That is definitely a problem. But yeah, that was the killer app of being able to go to one central location, find something, download it, boom, there it is. I don't like it, uninstall it by just holding your finger on it and uninstalling it. Great, let's move on to the next one. It is fantastic. All right, so malicious apps, that is a risk. What's the best protection? Just use the app stores, and on Android, they're taking off the ability for you to use a different app store. So you may not like that, but they cannot control currently in their OS you not going to an app store that's not approved and downloading a bunch of viruses and Trojans and bricking your device. And yeah, a lot of people automatically will just be like, okay, I know that that's the risk I'm taking. But more and more people these days on Android are not thinking that way. They're just hearing somebody say, oh, well, you use a Play Store? I don't use that. I use Black Market, blah, blah, blah. And there's all this cool stuff on it. And then, oh, okay, I'll go do that. Oh, you've just been hacked 14 times. It's not good. So on Android, they're really locking that down, saying you got to get it from us. That's currently in the process. We talked about unsecured Wi-Fi. If you're going to get onto Walmart, which I have to do, or like Safeway, I have to do, then I make sure that I'm not really doing anything. Oh, let me check my Chase account. I don't do it on that. I look up something on the web about, something I'm going to buy there. Lost phone, you want the ability to have that. It should already be encrypted on all the new devices. You don't have to look on iOS or Android. It's done. And it should be forcing you to put in a strong lock on your lock screen. So if it's not doing that, you need to up it. So if you got an older iOS device or an older Android and you can use a 4-digit PIN, yeah, that's really nice for you. It's also much more hackable. And of course, part of this lost phone or stolen phone is remote wipe. I don't know where it went. I don't want people getting my data off of it. Most of that's backed up to the cloud anyway. I'll just wipe it. You can also set it to go off. It'll just keep going off. And the great thing about these, if you have a really strong lock screen and encryption, is when somebody tries to go pawn that, they're not going to get any money for it. I don't care what it is. So Android or iOS are going to go in and say, I want it. And the person's going to, is this yours? Oh, yeah, it's mine. Well, what's the PIN? Oh, I don't know. I kind of lost that. Well, I'm not going to buy it because it's useless. Without getting into it and being able to set it up, it's useless. All it is a pretty thing with a lock screen. And then, of course, software vulnerabilities, make sure you do those updates. Make sure that you're not waiting a year to do your updates or even 3 months. All right, so study tips, think. Threat, what's the control? For every risk, immediately link it to a countermeasure. Practice this pairing until it's automatic. If there is one unit I would say really follow these study tips on, it's this unit. These are the devices you use all the time. Think about that. Okay, I downloaded this game. What? That's a threat. Why is it a threat? Because it's going to do things on your device. Anything you download onto that device is going to do things. That's why if you take your grandma's phone, Android or iPhone, and there's nothing installed on it other than she just messages and calls, that's why the thing just keeps working and never has a problem. So anytime you download something, that is a threat. What's the control for that? Well, the control is I'm getting it from the proper place, and I've looked at the permissions to see what it's going to take from me. Memorize the key vocabulary, know what it means to say sandbox, know what it means to say permission, and use real world scenarios like I just did for a threat control. What's going to happen if I connect to this cafe Wi-Fi? I wouldn't connect to any open Wi-Fi if I have a good cell connection, unless I'm on the road and I know that I'm not going to be able to charge my battery for a while. And then when I get on that Wi-Fi, I'm going to be careful about what I'm actually doing and accessing because I don't want a hacker to be somewhere in the vicinity watching what I'm doing and trying to see, oh, look at that, they're accessing their bank account, right? And then practice on your own device. There's tons of videos for this, but again, watch my little video on dealing with apps that are being installed and what kind of privacy they're going to take from you, what they're going to do. So go to settings, go to apps, review the actual permissions. Just take a look. I do that from time to time because there are apps that I use, and then there's apps I've installed and I've never used. And then I think, wait a minute, I wonder if that's trying to use anything it shouldn't. And I go in there and check real quick. And usually, right, they're not doing that. Okay, that is it for this module. Again, if you want more about, hey, when you're installing stuff, this is what to look for, take a look at that other video that I've done. And thanks for watching, and we'll talk with you later.